Okay. And so again, these recordings of these sessions do not go out to the public. They are designed for us to improve on our process, but it is set up for our individuals who are registered. If they so desire to have a copy, that will be sent to you. This is the second Zoom for this week. We started off the beginning of the week with our housing session. And that's because we have many of our families who are looking to become homeowners. If you were interested and did not get a chance to attend on Tuesday night, we will be having another session coming up next month. We had many people who called us or texted me and said that they had unfortunately wasn't able to make it. And so we will be doing those sessions again. We are looking at other sessions, including our 9-week Middle Class Express Life Coaching Series, and those dates are coming out soon. That's where you would meet for once a week for 2 hours, and it is based off of attitude and mindset. It is where you'll be able to design your life plan, look at your top goals, whether it's employment, whether it's purchasing a home, whether it's retirement, whatever your goals are. You would sit down and we would help you through a group coaching method to be able to put those into writing into a 5-year plan, and then to execute with your first year action steps. This, along with other access to resource Zooms, will be made available to you. The same link that you were able to register for this session, will be adding more groups. We're looking at having a live Zumba session. We have recorded a health workout, low cardio, and I wish that you could see my face right now because I am in this video, and I did not die. I did survive, but it was great getting with some of our health coaches and just getting our mind, body, and soul intact. We will also be having a Zoom. We're waiting on the presenter's date, and that Zoom will be focused on healthy eating, how to eat clean, how to take the vegetables that you have never tasted before and turn them into a gourmet meal. The whole program is going to be based off of not so much a vegetarian, vegan diet, but it is designed to help you to manage your intakes and how your eating habits also leads to other chronic illness. So we are going to again be sending those dates and that information out to you. And these sessions are open for everyone. So if you have family members that you would like to invite to the open Zooms, they are more than welcome. If you would like, when we have the orientation for our Middle Class Express next orientation, you are welcome to invite others to participate in that as well. So without further ado, I am going to turn over the bulk of the evening to Ms. Shonda Rogers, who comes with Operation Hope. She will do her introductions. I will say this on a personal side. Any of our presenters or organizations that I have in the 13 years brought to our Middle Class Express has been someone that I personally would vet in. And I say that because sometimes it's often you go to different places and folks say, hey, try this bowl of cereal. They've never tried it. They don't even like cereal, but they want you to go and seek services or eat something or do something with someone that they have not vetted the time in. I have watched Shonda work with our families. I have sat through her presentations and have learned many things for my own financial plannings. And I have put many of her suggestions into action. I have referred personal friends and family members to Shonda to sit down, because the difference with having someone talk to you versus someone who is going to listen to you, that is what Shonda brings. Shonda comes with a wealth of knowledge, but more so she comes with a compassionate heart, and she has the heart to help people move forward. So without further ado, Ms. Shonda.
Yes, thank you. I'm like, are you talking about me?
You know what? Family, y'all just don't understand what she puts me through.
But that's the kindred spirit we have.
Yes.
Because we both have a passion for helping people. And thank you again for that introduction. Welcome everyone. Again, as Bielka said, my name is Shonda Rogers, and I am a financial well-being coach with Operation Hope. I truly count it a blessing to be a part of an organization, especially during the season that we're in right now with the COVID and the pandemic situation. Being able to offer our services and offer these services for free to the community. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into the presentation. In the presentation, of course, you'll be able to hear a little bit about the organization. I'm going to start off first of all with a video that will give you a summary of what we are about, and then we'll get into the presentation. Bear with me just a second here. And I will tell you, with the technology, I may not be as fluid with it, but I will get it done today. We will, I promise.
Welcome to Operation Hope, an organization dedicated to promoting financial dignity through financial literacy and empowerment, helping turn renters into buyers and the disqualified into homeowners, molding entrepreneurial ideas and aspirations into viable small businesses, inspiring young people to take hold of their futures and make their dreams come true, promoting financial wellness in the workplace, helping to bring financial wholeness and peace of mind, standing with survivors, helping them restore dignity and rebuild their lives after a disaster. We are Operation Hope, working together to create a brighter financial future for us all. Join us as we continue to transform lives through financial dignity in the 21st century.
Okay, let's move on.
So Lit Mobile just sent me this solar wireless battery pack.
All right, so we're going to start. We're going to talk about actually two parts to the workshop. We're going to have, first of all, the credit part of it that will talk about different aspects of credit. And then we're going to have part two, which will be talking about budgeting. So we do, as part of the credit counseling program, we do the individual credit assessments, and we'll talk a little bit about that process later. And then we also go over your personal budget. And as we know, everyone's budget is different, and we actually make you a little bit more comfortable with the process of creating and also adhering to a budget. So without being anything else being said, we're going to go ahead and move into the initial presentation here. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I may not be as diligent about checking the chat during the process, so I'll have to check at the end, and we will open it as well to any Q&A that you may have. So as I stated earlier, this is a credit and money management workshop that we are sponsoring. And this is my contact information if you do want to contact me, which I'll be reaching out to each of you as well. But here is my information. If you want to take that down, you can do so.
And I'll be putting that in the chat for anyone who misses it.
Okay, great. And this is a video that I will also share with everyone so that, you know, for time purposes, we'll go ahead on through. But this is our chairman, Mr. John Hope Bryant. You may have seen him on various media outlets, especially right now. He's promoting a lot of the small business initiatives that are going on with the COVID situation. So he is the chairman of Operation Hope, and he founded it. The organization actually is 28 years. We've just celebrated an anniversary. So this slide tells a little bit about some of the successes that the organization has seen We've actually empowered over 1.8 million adults with financial dignity. We have, as you saw in the video, we have a youth program. So we've also empowered over 1 million youth through financial literacy as well. We have 4,000 school and community organization partners. We have 500 plus youth businesses that have been started. We have a 72% increase of, 72% of our clients, put it that way, experience a FICO score increase, and that we're proud of as well. We have 2.7 million, which have been seeing the economic activity directed into some disenfranchised communities. We have actually, instead of 100, it says 100 plus, but we have over 150 offices across the United States. So these are just, I won't go into everything, but it does tell you a little bit about who we are. And the next slide would also tell you the 4 components of Operation Hope. So we have the adult division, which is what I do. I do the credit and money management and as well as a small business program in Raleigh. We're centered in Raleigh. And then we have a youth division that is also in some of our branches in other states. Right now in North Carolina, we do not have a youth program, but we do offer that in some locations. We also have what we call a Hope Inside the Workplace. So what that entails is we have coaches now, and this is probably one of the newer branches of Operation Hope. We have coaches that have been partnering with some of our corporate entities such as Delta Airlines, UPS, and Atlanta Public School Systems also is one of our partners. We have coaches that are actually in these arenas, and they're serving as coaches for the employees of these organizations. So that is one initiative that will be growing eventually. But right now we've got about 4 or 5 organizations that we're partnering with to provide coaches in their corporate offices. So then we have also the 4th, and right now one of the most important components is the Hope Inside Disaster. So we have what we call the Hope Coalition of America, which serves as a liaison for any natural disaster. But now that we have the pandemic, we're also being able to serve as a liaison for our clients and anyone in the community that has experienced or is being impacted by this. And it's almost everyone in some form or fashion that's being impacted. So we actually can serve in different capacities, either from the credit side, personal credit side, or either from the small business side. And so with that, we will talk about a little bit later some of the tools that we have that can help individuals that may be facing or how to prepare for a disaster, but also if you're facing any situation right now that you're needing immediate assistance, we can definitely help you with being connected with resources. So definitely we can talk about that a little bit later. So just getting into the credit and money management aspect of the workshop, this talks about the workshop topics that we will be discussing. We'll talk about understanding your credit, what makes up your credit score, knowing your rights as a consumer, establishing and rebuilding your credit profile as well. So I normally ask when we're in a face-to-face workshop, when is the last time you've seen your credit report? But that's just something that you can think about, but we do recommend that you see your credit report at least annually. And so there's actually a website, annualcreditreport.com, which right now they're offering, if you go to this website, you'll be able to find that they're offering free weekly credit reports because of the pandemic. So that is a really good thing for consumers, because you want to know what is on your credit and make sure that you're doing whatever you can do to still work towards increasing your credit score. So the 3 different credit bureaus are listed here. Equifax, we have Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And so we actually, when we sit down as part of our credit and money management counseling program, we pulled the TransUnion report, and we used to do the the Equifax as well, not the Equifax report, and then we would compare take the lowest score and compare and process look at the and look at the items and then resolve those items on the report that had the lowest score. Now we actually just use the TransUnion report. And so when we look at the TransUnion report, we're looking at errors, we're looking at any slow pays or any derogatory information, and we make recommendations. And the 3 main objectives of the program are, number 1, we want to make recommendations for helping you increase your credit score to at least 700. Number 2, we want to make recommendations for paying down debt. And then number 3, make recommendations for saving. So the second part of the workshop where we talk about budgeting, that's where that comes in. When we're talking about paying down debt and increasing your savings, we look at where you can free up money to be able to do those as well. And then we talk about, on this slide here, understanding your credit. And when you're talking about understanding credit, I mean, we know, just like a grade in school, that, you know, you're basically graded on how you have managed your credit, but a lot of times you don't know what that number actually means. And so this slide gives a little bit of an idea of what that score looks like as far as the grade level and where you fall at. Now, 850 is the highest and 300 is the lowest score that you could have. But then it tells you if you're in the green, you have considered excellent or good. Well, dark green is excellent. The lighter color green is good or above average credit. We have the yellow, of course, is good credit, and then you have others below. So wherever you are, when we do the assessment, we do look at your situation and we make recommendations to get you as close. Well, ideally, like I said, we want to get you to 700. And with the action items that we do recommend, it may take a while. Some people actually enroll in the program. It may take them 30 days, depending on how close they are. And we will work with you up to 24 months to be able to get to that goal. So, and that's a good thing as far as making sure that we are taking those consistent action items. So this slide is perhaps one of the most important because it actually tells you on a percentage basis what makes up your actual credit score. So when you look at the different types of credit different type of categories that make up the credit score, you look at payment history and you also look at the total debt utilization. Those are the biggest components of your credit score. So you have 35% of that credit score is determined on how you make your payments on time. The other, there's another 30% that is determined on how you're utilizing your credit. And when we'll talk about a little later about the revolving credit, which is considered your credit cards. When you are able to keep your credit card balances at or below 30% of the credit limit, you're going to be getting the maximum points for your credit score. So in essence, and I tell clients all the time, because I didn't know this until I really started doing this job and then practicing what I preach as well, looking at the impact that a credit card can have on your credit score is amazing, the impact. And it's not that, I mean, I'm not like myself. I used to think, well, credit cards were bad. Actually, you can improve your credit score the greatest with the credit card because it can make up 65% of your credit score when you're looking at handling the balance appropriately within that 30% range and then making your payment on time for that credit card. Where versus you have installment debt, it's going to be 35% of your credit score because you're going to be making your payment on time. And then you also have length of credit history, which is 15% of your score, the account diversity, which is 10%, and then new credit. And the next slides kind of determine, explain what that is. So when you're looking at payment history, which is at 35%, it identifies if you have paid your past credit accounts on time. It includes also payment history for all of your revolving and installment debt, as well as any public record and collections items, any details on late or missed payments, and then also calculates how many accounts show as no late payment. So that anytime you can have your payments on time, I mean, you're only going to increase your credit score, and that's obvious with that. Then we look at the 30%, which, as I mentioned earlier, is mainly targeted towards your revolving accounts. And this takes into consideration the amount that you owe, such as your balances versus the maximum amount you can borrow, which is the credit limit. And the credit score is maximized by keeping, as I just mentioned this, but it is maximized by keeping your revolving accounts less than 30% of the total credit limit. And that perhaps is the most important thing to know when you have a credit card. Say, for instance, you have a $1,000 credit limit on your credit card. You would want to keep your balance between 0 and 30% at all times. And so what we do recommend when we're working with the budget with our clients, we recommend that once you're able to get your account balances within a reasonable amount, if they're between 0 and 30%, If you get it down to 0 and you want to keep that card active so that they don't close the card, what we recommend is you have something charged on the card, like maybe a Netflix subscription or something, or some kind of insurance payment or something that's going to be already budgeted. And so that way you can keep that activity going on that card and they won't close it, but you're also getting credit for your payment on time, and you're keeping your utilization under that 30% as well. So that's a way to make credit work for you instead of your credit telling you, working against you, put it that way. So you want to definitely make sure that you're knowing all of that. The next part of the credit score is the length of credit history. So that's 15%. So that in essence means how long your credit accounts have been open. What is the age of your oldest account, the average age of all of your accounts, how long your specific credit accounts have been open, and also how long has it been since you used certain accounts. And as I mentioned earlier, some cards, especially like your merchant cards, where you have like store cards, Target, JCPenney, those type of cards, I think they have a tendency to close those quicker if you don't use them. So even with those, if you have a card and you get that balance paid down, we do recommend that you go and you buy something very minute and then you go back and pay that off, and that way you're keeping that activity. And you also end up not even paying the interest on the card if you do that as well. And then of course the 10% that was talking about the new credit. This means how many of your accounts are new? When was the last time you opened a new account? How many times have you requested credit? How long has it been since inquiries were made by lenders? And if after past payment problems, have you had good credit since that time? So when we talk about inquiries, and I don't know if maybe we'll talk about it later, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned the inquiries about that there are actually the maximum that at any point you would want to have are 3. Now I know that we may end up having more than 3, but if we have more than 3, it's going to negatively impact your credit score. So when you go and you maybe apply for a car loan or something like that, sometimes they may shop around for you and you end up having a lot more than 3 inquiries. So in that case, what we recommend is you go to your local bank or your local credit union, and then you get a pre-qualification before you go to the lot. And then that way you don't end up with all these inquiries on your report, because they will stay on there for 2 years. And then after that point, they'll start falling off. But you really want to make sure you monitor the inquiries, because they will negatively impact your score as well. And this slide talks about the types of credit and usage. So we talked briefly about the revolving, which includes credit cards and also includes home equity lines of credit. And installment loans would be your mortgages, your student loan debt, your car payments, and personal loans. This slide talks about how long negative items stay on your report. So when we look at our clients' credit reports and we see charge-offs and we see collections, we do make suggestions or recommendations for getting those resolved. But if they are not paid, these are the length of time that it will stay on there. And even after the balance is 0, charge-offs normally will still stay on there as well. Now collections, you have to sometimes ask them to remove that item, and then sometimes they may remove it automatically. It just depends on who that collections agency is. But then there's also civil judgments, general civil judgments that stay on there for 7 years, some tax liens, as well as some of the bankruptcies that are listed below, and the amount of time that they stay on the account on the credit report. And this slide here actually talks about your rights and some of the acts that are protecting the consumers. And there's a booklet that I have. If I send it to Velka, and if you're able to get that, which will make sure that each one of you receive that booklet, you'll be able to find out in more detail about these acts and what your rights are as a consumer. So part of the credit counseling program does talk about, or majority of it actually talks about, either you're establishing credit or you're rebuilding credit. So you've ever heard the saying that no credit is just as bad as, not having credit is just as bad as bad credit, right? Not if you don't have any credit. So what we do is we look at what your situation looks like, and then we make recommendations based on what you have already, because we don't want you to be overextended in any way. So what we do is we make recommendations. So there are ways that you can build credit without having your credit report ran or anything like that. So we do make recommendations. There's some new products out there that will allow that. So when you're establishing or rebuilding your credit, some of the things you want to consider are making sure you're protected against identity theft, because the higher your credit score increases, that's the more likelihood of you actually having your identity taken and people having things charged in your name. So we want to make sure that you have something in place that you can protect your identity during that time. We also assist you with disputing inaccurate information. So we have letters that we actually give to our clients. And with the letters basically will say that they're going to have to verify that the information is correct. And it may be that the item is correct, but the amount may be incorrect. So we want to definitely make sure before you pay off any of your collections that they're verifying that the amounts are correct as well. So once they do start like verifying or either responding back to those letters, they'll either have you to they won't reply back and they remove the item, or they'll reply back and have you to settle the item and tell you what amount they will be able to accept. Or if they don't reply back in 30 days, and that's actually part of the act that we talk about in the booklet, that if they don't reply back in 30 days, you legally are entitled to have that item removed. A lot of times people don't know that. And so being able to know when that letter goes out, that 30-day process starts to count down is very important as well. So then also when we're talking about rebuilding and paying off debt, we look at which debt you should start paying off first. And a lot of times we look at your interest rates, or just a couple of other factors as well. But of course, the interest rate is going to be one of the factors, looking at how you can save by paying that card off versus continuing to pay that high interest rate. And so with rebuilding, there is a way that you can rebuild through a secured credit card. So if a lot of times you're not able to get a card through some of the traditional ways of getting a regular credit card, you can actually get a secured card that will help you. And the difference in a secured card versus a regular credit card is that with a secured card, you have a deposit or amount that you put up front, and that's the amount that your credit limit is going to be. So those are a great way to rebuild as well. And so a part of the rebuilding process is looking at your public records, which that's very seldom that we have to address that. So that is one of the ways that we look at rebuilding your credit profile though. We do also recommend that you do not close any accounts. So say you pay off your credit card and you really don't want to use it anymore. What we recommend doing is to keep it and pay it off each month. Like we talked about earlier with the budget. If you just charge something and then you pay it off, that way you keep it active, you never pay the interest on it. And then it also does not negatively impact your credit score, because if you close it, your score is going to go down. And we don't know exactly how much, but it's going to go down. So, and then the last item here, it says pay off closed accounts with balances. So if you do have closed accounts that have a balance and they're sitting on your credit report and it's like not ready to fall off yet because of the 7 years, well, what we do is look at you calling the creditor and see what they can settle that amount for and actually count it paid in full. So you want to have as many zero balances on your credit report as possible. But again, every situation is different. It may not warrant that, but normally we do want to make sure that that account is paid off. So that's the first part on the credit. I'm going to take any questions real quickly, if there are any, before we do go into the budgeting part. So if I can check the chat to see if there are any questions.
Well, I can tell you, Shauna, some folks didn't put them in the chat, the full chat, or I've gotten text messages. So one of the questions someone had was about charge-offs.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, on this specific, I'm actually going to have them connect with you directly on that one. Okay. But on charge-offs, if you can go back up, you had that on one of the slides.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if I can go back here. Which it was how long it stayed on the report? Right. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, didn't go back to that. Let me just go back through this way. Okay. So the charge-offs normally, as we stated, stay on there for 7 years. I was just finding this out recently because it's so much is changing about credit, or when you go to purchase a home, sometimes they may accept a charge off up there. It depends on how old it is. So it's a lot that is a factor when we say charge offs. If it's close to that 7 year mark, it may be that you can get away with not paying it. But if it's like fairly new within the last 24 months, we definitely want to see what they will work with you on to get that paid off and counted as paid in full.
Exactly.
So,
And then we have from Ms. Martinez, we have, when do you recommend bankruptcy? For how long, and how long does it affect you?
okay, so anytime we get bankruptcy questions, we always refer our clients to legal counsel because we're not able to recommend any. We don't say anything about bankruptcy. We want to make sure there's a resolution to the problem. But if someone's just so adamant about filing bankruptcy, we do have to refer them to receive any counsel on that so they know what their rights are.
And that's a good response. And the reason I say that is a lot of times for many of our families and many of the participants, individuals that we've been working with over the years, bankruptcy seems, and Shonda, please correct me if I say this out of context. Sometimes we are quick to file bankruptcy because we see that as our last resort.
Mm-hmm.
And many times, I can give a perfect example. I had a young lady who did not own a home. She was basically going to file bankruptcy on about 20 something $1,000 worth of credit cards, and it was some it was a student loan in there, and there was a few other things, but in total it was less than $50,000. And when we sat down and literally wrote down, we printed off her credit report. We did the simple one of creditkarma.com, where we can see the great pictures, and that was able to tell the story of what was happening for her. And by the time and I am no financial advisor, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an attorney, but just sitting down and asking some hard rock questions. By the time we were finished and we made some phone calls, not only did she not have to file for bankruptcy, she is now a homeowner.
Wow.
Because she took the time to work on what was there. Right. I can give the opposite side where someone, some people use, if you file bankruptcy, but if your mindset, if your attitude towards money does not change, it doesn't matter filing bankruptcy because you're going to wind back in the exact same position later on.
That's right. That's right.
So when I hear bankruptcy, I'm like, okay, what have you done? What have you done? What can you do? And what are you willing to do? Because there's hope in everything. And like I said, unfortunately for a lot of individuals, we are pushed into bankruptcy without getting a chance to mediate. Because it may be something that's not even affecting you from purchasing a home or buying that car. It may be something that you can negotiate. And I believe Shana on one of the slides and talked about that. Like basically when you're going in to negotiate, like don't just automatically assume that you're in the wrong. Medical ones, we work with a lot of our folks who, if you had hospital bills, contact that hospital. I can give an example. Contact Wake Med if it was at Wake Med. All of our hospitals here has charitable funds. Wake Med is getting funds from state and county. So they have a lot of different programs that when you talk to them, you'll be surprised where that bill was $10,000, for that emergency room and that two Band-Aids that you got. All of a sudden they are able to work with you based off of your income and based off of your situation to get you to a more affordable billing, and then you can make payments on it.
Right.
So just don't throw in the towel with bankruptcy. I do understand bankruptcy does help folks, but if you're going to file bankruptcy, please make sure you're working with us to help you on that attitude and that mindset towards your finances, so it does not repeat itself.
Right. That is an excellent answer for that, Bianca, because it's not a quick fix. And I always say that we didn't get into the situation, or some person didn't get into the credit situation overnight. So they're not going to get out of it overnight, but you have to be patient. And like you mentioned, it is a mindset, because you can't continue to make the same decisions, good or bad, but the same decisions and expect it to be better. So what we do, we want to make sure that you don't end up filing bankruptcy. So we do want to talk it through, see what your options are, help you call your creditors. A lot of times I tell clients, and I actually have clients come in, or if we're now remote, we're talking about their credit and they want to three-way me in with their creditor, I'll be on the phone with them to be able to advocate and know what and be able to interpret, because a lot of times you may not understand what they're saying or what they're able to do. And we know sometimes what they're able to do, even when they say they cannot. And so we like to be able to advocate for those so that you don't end up. So that's why I say we don't talk about bankruptcy as an option. But if you've already had one to occur, you can still purchase a home, regardless of what you may think. Like she just mentioned, with some of the problems that may go on before you file bankruptcy. But even after you do file bankruptcy, don't even think that that's the end of the world either, because you can even qualify for a home after that. So that's a misconception that people have, is even if they do. Now, like I said, if you haven't already, or if you're thinking about it and haven't, sit down and talk with us first before you even go seek legal counsel. We don't just automatically send you there. We do talk through some of the options before we refer you. But if you're still adamant about it, then that's when we refer you. We don't just automatically do that. Because like Bianca said, I've seen so many people that came in and they felt like their situation was just the worst of the worst, and they were never going to get out of it. And we worked with them 18 months or 12 months or whatever, and they were able to, get out of the debt that they were in. But it took a process and took time to do that. So yeah, that's good advice. Any other questions?
Now from Manuela, says, do you have any advice about student loans, old ones?
Old student loans, first of all, make sure that you keep, if they're not in deferment, or if they're, put it this way, if they've already defaulted, what you would need to do is contact the servicer to enter a rehabilitation program. And that rehabilitation program may be from 6 to 8 months. And what they're doing is just basically having you prove that you're going to make the payments on time. Now, that depending on your income, it may be that I've had clients that had a $5 payment for 6 months or 8 months or whatever. And when they paid that $5 for that period of time, it was back in good standing. So the thing to do with the student loans is not to avoid, anything as far as facing that is out there, because it's not going anywhere. So once you deal with it, and a lot of times they will look at your income and determining what your payment is going to be. Now, if it's at a point where your payment is going to be higher because you're making more money, they're also able to work with you on that to either make an interest only for a certain amount of time. You can also, if you're in school, you can actually get a deferment. And if your income is at a level where your payment is higher than you would want it to be, you can also have a hardship forbearance as well. So the best thing that you can do is communicate with creditors. And I mean, I can't stress that enough, because I can say from experience, anytime that we avoid a situation, it's only going to get worse, and then it's harder, or it take more time to dig out of that situation. So if you can just face it head on, call, and like I said, if you come into us or you have me we're working together, you can call and I be on the phone with you, and we can talk through the process on how to resolve that issue. So.
Thank you. And the next question is coming from the Baskerville family. It says, by having a closed account, but with no balance, should they look into removing it?
We don't recommend that, because of the fact is, when we're reviewing the credit report, what I look at is any account that has a balance. If it's in if it's in good standing, like if it's active and it has a zero balance, like a credit card or something, I'll just, make a note to just say, keep it active as much as you can, like charge it and, pay it off and that type of thing. But if it's already closed and the balance is zero, it's not going to negatively impact your score. So I wouldn't recommend removing it, but if you wanted to, you can always contact the creditor and or the credit bureau to request that it be removed. So, I still, it really doesn't matter. It's just up to whatever the preference is, your preference.
Another question that, I'm sorry, and there's Ms. Winston has, even with a hardship deferment, will the price balance go down or be a negative impact? Even with the hardship.
So with the hardship deferment for student loans, you saying what was the question? The second part of that?
Will the balance go down or will it be a negative impact?
Oh, that's a good question. That is a good question, because a lot of times when we're in the hardship forbearance, well, not a lot of times, but all of the time, it is going to still be accruing interest. And so you want to make sure that you're paying, you're monitoring that. And there are times when you can make payments on the interest if you'd like to, and that way because if the balance is going up in that period of time, then your score can actually be going down because you've got more credit that's accruing and the payment is not being made. So yeah, we do look at the individual circumstance and see if the government is actually paying the interest or if the person is responsible for the interest. And that way, if you're responsible for the interest and that is accumulating every month, you definitely want to make the interest payment on it so that the balance will not increase.
Awesome. So next we have a question that comes in, talks about, do you recommend to pay on a full student loan? And by doing this, will it increase your credit?
So the question is pay on the student loan, and will it impact your credit if you pay what?
If you pay the student loan off. So
if they
pay,
if they have like a $500 balance on a student loan and they're asking if they should pay that amount off instead of making a payment, is that what the question is?
Correct.
And again, that's up to the individual. And if you look at the fact that interest is going to be accruing on that amount, I personally would want to, depending especially on what the interest rate is as well. So if the person doesn't have any other item that's reporting, so that's why I say it's not really a wrong or a right answer for that, because it's going to also depend on what else is being reported. So if there's nothing else being reported, it might be best that that person continue to make that payment until they have some other form of credit, because once it's paid off, then the score can plummet because there's no activity.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. And I'm glad that you said it that way. So I'm giving you a personal, Raquel, personal experience with doing so. So I actually took and came into a policy and thought I was raised, you don't have any credit, you don't owe anybody. Mm-hmm. And I took this lump sum of money and I made the biggest mistake of my life. I paid off my dear friend, Sally Mae. Mm-hmm. I thought she was my friend because they used to call me all the time. And I thought that she, wanted to get to know me better. And I paid off this loan and it actually hurt my credit. It hurt my credit. And I actually had a $17 balance that was left over, because here I'm thinking I'm doing something major. I'm not talking about a small, I'm talking about a serious amount of money. And I paid it off. Later, what I learned was what would have been better for me is if I had taken that money, probably could have almost purchased a house. And if to increase my credit score, if I had continued to make payments. So let's just imagine I had an account in my bank account and that money was sitting there for 6 to 9 months, just making, divide up whatever the loan amount was, into 12 months, right?
Right.
And if I
Mhm.
had made those payments monthly consistently each month, and at the end, yes, I would have paid off the bill, but it would have made a huge difference in my on my credit score.
Right. Right.
By me paying it off, all it did was freeze it right where it was at. It didn't say they didn't even send me a thank you letter. And so you got to kind of look at right when you get into these large sums of money. Sometimes, like me, I thought that was the great thing to do, was to pay off all my debt. And what it showed me was not only could I had, and true story, I could at that time could have purchased a home as a second income.
Mm.
I could have literally invested that money, had the money paying each month, making payments each month like I was doing before, and still would have been able to pay off the bill by paying it off in a timely frame that was showing a history of payment. And like Shonda said, if you're not reporting anything else, that's it. Everything stops right there with that large payment. So you
Right.
just got to kind of balance out how you're going to pay something off.
Exactly, because what I said earlier about no credit is just as bad as bad credit. So you want to have some kind of activity being reported, and ideally, 1 to 3 trade items is what is recommended. That means, well, I know from one of a client that I've had, several clients I have examples, but one in particular I saw go from a 0 to a 7. And I say 0 because when he came in to have his assessment done, he didn't have a score because he didn't have anything that was reporting. So it did not calculate a score. So he got like a secured card, and he kept the balance somewhere like $18, maybe just charging something minimally, and he would pay it off. And within 6 months, he had a 750 credit score by just having that one secured card. And I think it was
Yep.
a $300 credit limit. So if he hadn't had anything, he wouldn't have had any score, in December when we checked it, because he wouldn't have had any activity. So it's not really how much credit you have. You have to have something, but I will say revolving credit is going to have the most impact on a score. So we do recommend, a secured card to be able to have that impact as well. But an installment can just as well be reported and cause your score to increase to a certain degree.
Yeah. So another question, well, this was a part of a question that the person and I have been working through, is dealing with COVID-19 situations for some folks. Either may have either lost their income, or hours have been reduced, and making sure that you're staying on top of your bills. One, I always tell folks, you cannot lose sleep over what you can't control.
That's right.
Okay. So we have to work on these plans. We have to have things in writing. So one of the things I have been working with this particular family is making a list of all of your credit, all of your debts, monthly debts. Pull your bills together and look at things that you can eliminate.
Mhm.
And whether this was COVID-19 or not, you probably should have been eliminating them anyway, because
Right.
they're not helping you, they're harming you. Some of these extra things, cable. I'll
Yeah.
say it, I don't have cable. Why
Yeah.
I don't have cable? If I'm spending that much time watching TV, I'm not working on my plan. I'm
Right.
not focusing on my next.
Mhm.
So taking a look at your true payment, your true monthly budget, and seeing what is a necessity, what is a want, and what is I didn't even know I had that on, that I was paying that monthly. True statement. I will never give you advice that I don't take from myself.
Mhm.
I actually went through, because I was talking to this family and helping them get together a budget to help them through. And I understand this is to take you through COVID, but this is to build your tomorrow. This is something we should have been doing before COVID. But circumstances for her has changed drastically. And so I went back and looked at my own monthly expenses. And I was laughing at myself. I did not even realize that I have been paying still. I thought I canceled a subscription years. And when I say years, I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking probably 6, 7, and unfortunately probably more than that years ago. I thought I canceled this. And it was $11 a month
Wow.
for a service that I have not used. And it's the prepaid legal.
Wow.
And so I'm sitting here with all of this wealth of knowledge and helping folks. And, and so I went back and I said, wow, wait a minute. I've been paying $11 a month for 12 months, which is $132. And let's just say at a crazy max, it's been 9 years. I gave away $1,188.
No,
I just gave it away. I didn't even know I lost it. So can you imagine if you go clean out your closets right now, and ladies, and you're emptying your pocketbooks, and you found $1,188? Not only are you running through the house doing a praise dance, you're scratching your head and saying, "Wait a minute, did I find $1,188, or did I lose $1,188 and just happen to find it?" So when you start running your budget monthly and start looking at what you have been paying out, you will find that there's things that you may not even realize. I used to have the auto bell monthly service, right? I really did like to have my car kept clean. I didn't like the pollen and all that. But right now, I'm Sam Express, I'm sorry. And yeah, while it was only $20, and I'm saying only $20, well, wait a minute, you're talking to the person who counts every penny. If I'm not out here driving my car like that, and I'm not, worried about the pollen on my car, why am I spending $20 a month to have something that I'm not utilizing? So when you look at what you are not using and you start to make some cuts, you'll be surprised how you take that same $20 that I was not using correctly, and put it towards a bill, how quickly that bill now seems a little bit more manageable.
Right. That is so true. That is so true.
So these are things that we are part of our Middle Class Express. If you do not have your finances and your health in order, it does not matter how much money you make, because you are not even able to see the end result.
No.
We have individuals who purchase home, the young lady works at Walmart. She is making $13 an hour, and she is now a homeowner.
Mm.
How is she a homeowner? She sat down and figured out what was her needs, what was her wants, and what was I didn't even know I was paying for. Okay, so these things are possible. We have another one came in as private. If I file, okay, so this goes back to the bankruptcy question. Shonda, the question is, if I filed bankruptcy in the past, how long can I make a purchase? How long can I apply for how long can she apply for loans?
A home mortgage, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah. And I will say that varies per lender, but I know the Habitat program, they at one, and I guess they still have this program. I need to reach out to them to make sure, but they have a program that was allowing individuals to come in before come into the program and get the preliminary qualifications before at a certain time, like I think it was like 18 months or something like that after on the other side of the bankruptcy, when it was discharged or whatever. So it varies. And some of your private lenders, now I know with First Horizon, they will not allow a bankruptcy or a foreclosure for their home mortgage loans. So each lender may be different, but when you have programs like, Habitat and some of the local programs, they may be a little bit more lenient. They may say, okay, well, 24 months or 18 months. So it really will vary. But so it is possible. It is definitely possible. I would never say that you could not, because if you run into an obstacle with one program or one lender or whatever, just shop around. That's what I always say, and find something that's going to be a fit for your situation. But I did want to inject something here before I forget, because you were talking about student loans, and this might be appropriate here when you talk about the home ownership process. I want to go back before I forget this. The importance of knowing if you're accruing student loan debt, it's going to impact the amount of home that you're going to be able to buy down the road. And I think that lack of information early on is not beneficial, because a lot of times we don't find that out until we go to apply for a mortgage, and then they tell us that we don't qualify because we've got so much debt out there. So some programs will look at 1% of the credit of the loan amount, of the student loan amount. So say you have $100,000 in student loan debt out there, they're going to look at $1,000 as a monthly payment, and that will be determined, that will be used to calculate your debt to income ratio, which when you go to purchase a home, they'll talk about debt to income ratio. And so it negatively impacts the amount of home that you're going to be able to afford, because if you're not making a certain amount and you've got this huge debt out there, then you're not going to be able to qualify for a home. So again, find a program that works for you. Now, it may be that you're not able to, now I go back and say, it may be that you're not able to qualify for that program. There is a program that I know of through one of the banks in the area, we can talk about that later, that actually doesn't even look at the 1%. For instance, if you're in a deferment or forbearance or hardship forbearance and your payment is $5 or is $0 or whatever it is, they will look at that as in calculating your debt to income ratio. So just knowing that, first of all, the point I'm trying to make with that is just be careful with the amount of student loan debt that you accrue, because later on you may say you want to buy a home, and then it's like, okay, you have all this other debt out there that may impact what you're able to qualify for. But then if you do have student loan debt and you're wanting to qualify for a home, make sure that you find a program that will allow you to qualify based on that debt to income ratio that they're requiring. So that was what I wanted to say about the student loans. Any other questions?
I apologize. I lost my mute button. There we go. Okay.
I was afraid the internet went down. I was like, okay, because
I was sitting here pushing the button, and I was like, Lord, help me, Lord. Okay, so not in the chat, but a couple of things, Shannon, that folks, we have been talking with some of the participants that are on, kind of taking us back to COVID and looking at how to build a budget. What are some of the tools? Because I know you had spoke before about some of the tools that you have used or researched about between making a budget, creating the budget, and actually working the budget. Mm-hmm. and then also just tools on how to stick to those budgets.
Okay, well, that just led up to the next part of the presentation, so thank you. So we're going to talk about budget. That, as I mentioned earlier, that's part 2. So we're going to talk about the purpose of a budget, and then we'll give you some tips as well on dealing with the, like I said, the season that we're in right now with COVID, and how to budget when there's less coming in. So real quickly, it's going to talk about, first of all, what is the purpose of a budget? So the budget tells your money where it's going, instead of your money tell you where it went after it's all over with, and you wonder what happened to that money that I had at the end of the month, and it's like just like a few days later and you're already, you know, in the red. So we want to make sure that you do have a budget, and as part of that, when we do the credit counseling, we develop a work plan based on the recommendations that we discussed and we finalize and make sure that we're tracking your progress along the way. At the end of every work plan that I give out, I always have percentages and percentages that are going to help stay on track with how much should be spent on your home expenses, how much should be spent on your utilities, how much based on percentages of what your net income is, that is. So everyone's budget, that's why we always say everyone's budget is going to be different, because everyone, first of all, is bringing in a different amount, and then they may be paying something different on whatever, I mean, the rent or whatever the charges are every month. So we have different categories like home expense, utilities, transportation, food, you know, investing, saving. We make sure, and we do make sure that you are saving as well as one of those categories, because we don't want you to be paying bills and then at the end say, oh yeah, I have like $2 left over, I'm going to save. No, we want to make sure that you have already allocated at the beginning, you know, before you get paid, how much of that money is going to go towards saving, so that you're developing your emergency fund as well. So we're talking about that. We're going to skip this part, but we're going to talk about paying off debt, saving money, and eventually we'll talk about how to handle the situation where you're having less come in and how to make a budget work. So it says here, a budget will help you create money to begin paying off debt and saving money for the things that matter to you the most. So when we talked about earlier the objectives of the organization and increasing your credit score and reducing debt and increasing your savings, we do ask that our clients present a copy of their bank statement, and that reason being primarily for what Velka just said earlier, when we have expenses going out and we don't even realize how much that adds up. And we may have a client that says, oh yeah, I don't eat out that much, but then we look at the statement, the bank statement is going to tell, it's not going to lie, it's going to tell exactly how much that person is eating out. So that's when we're able to make recommendations, when we actually look at the numbers. And also we can catch any errors. If there is a subscription that's on autopilot and the person didn't even know, we can say, what is this? I mean, do you really need this or whatever? So that's what we do. We do the dirty work for you. So we make the recommendations. And of course, like we said earlier, it's up to you to take the action, but we do make the recommendations. So in looking at tips to building your savings, some of the recommendations we make, and this is just like in a hypothetical situation, if you have enough coming in that you're able to save a substantial amount. Now I say that because any amount that you're bringing in, we would like for you to be able to save something. If it's nothing but $1, if it's nothing but $5 every pay period, something so that you can develop a habit of saving. Now, some other ways that you can find a way to save are listed here. So such examples are like finding loose change and placing it in a jar. I've heard people say that every time they have change, they just drop it in a jar and it ends up adding up and they take it to the bank. That's one way to save. You can have auto transfer money from your checking into your online savings account monthly. And that's something that we do recommend, that you have a separate online account that is not easily accessible, because that way you're less likely to go back and tap into it or either transfer it into your checking, because most of us have a checking and a saving that's linked. And if you're like me or in the past, and I try to get away from doing this now, but you're at the register and you're like, oh my God, I don't have enough, let me transfer from my savings. Well, that's not the savings that we want you to have. Now that could be a working savings, but we want you to have a savings that's also building each month or each pay period. So that's where the online or one that's not going to be easily accessible with that would come in. Also, another recommendation is to have direct deposit from your paycheck. So you never miss what you don't see, right? So if you say $25 every pay period, just automatically coming off the top, going into a savings that is online and you don't even see it, that's another way. And then you turn around, you may have $500 and you're like, where did that come from? But you're building it on a consistent basis. Another one, and I always use this example, I had an uncle one time that he would trade cars, and this was back in the probably late 80s. I know it was late 80s. He would always trade cars every 2 to 3 years. And I'm like, well, how is he able to do this? So he explained what he was doing is and I guess he started with his first car. He must have paid his first car cash. So every time he bought a car after then, he would trade the car that he had, but he had already kept making the payment. So when he get that car, like the first car, when he got it paid for, he had been saving money, like a payment, paying himself a car payment. So he took the car that he had that was, and I'm going to use this again, but I'm actually getting turned around with it. But what he did, I'm saying, like the first time he had this done, he probably paid for his car cash. And then when he had a payment, or they may have told him what the payment was going to be, he continued to put that money in the bank. So when he decided he wanted to trade that car in, he took the car and the money that he had saved, went onto the lot, picked out a car, and he left with no car payment. What would he do? He would pay himself just like he was paying a car payment, but he was putting it in the bank and then actually he didn't put it in the bank, but he didn't believe in bank accounts, but he did keep the money. He kept it in a separate somewhere in a secret place, but he continued to pay himself. The main idea is that he kept paying himself so that he never ended up having a car payment. So what I'm saying that for is, once you pay off a loan, say you have a personal loan out there and it's $150 and the loan gets paid off. Well, that's not $150 extra that you can go to the mall or go splurge or whatever. You want to make sure you're still making that payment to yourself. And so that's a sneak tip way, I guess you could say, to save, because you've already budgeted that payment that was coming out before that bill got paid off. So there's a way, that's like I said earlier, that's the way you can do, you can purchase a car that way, or either you can save and build your emergency fund that way. And then eventually look at investing the money that you've saved. So that's when you can start talking about investing, when you've got a nest egg of saving. But when you're living, paycheck to paycheck, $5, not able to really build money, we really don't, and we don't give the advice about investing, but we do have quite a number of clients that ask about, when should they invest? And we do recommend, of course, you have to have money in order to invest. So we definitely recommend that you have an emergency fund and have, an amount that you can spare going into another account if you would like to invest in something. So it says here that the next one says, put all your extra money like bonuses, refunds into savings. So for instance, we just, was blessed with the stimulus money. Hopefully a lot of times you just forgot that you had that and put it directly into savings, or set up a separate savings account and put that into an account. And that way, that's a way to save and catch up from where you may not have been able to save before. So these are just some tips on how you can save without having to worry about every month not having enough or feeling like you have enough to actually save. And this slide here, we talked about a little bit earlier, it just lists the different types of credit cards. So that part is in here, and it's also in your booklet. It does talk a little bit more about that later. And when it tells here that each person's budget is different, we did mention that as well. So remember to customize your own life and your expenses and determine what are a priority to you. And so what may be a priority to you may not be a priority to someone else. And then in looking at savings, we do make sure that we stress the fact that savings is not an option. You must pay yourself. And like we mentioned earlier, if it's just $5 or whatever you can do consistently, and as you can free up more money, then you can increase your savings as well. So just make sure that you continue to save on a consistent basis. And when looking at the plan that we do help develop with you, we look at your short and long-term financial goals, and we help you work towards it, like paying off debt, paying down a home, or whatever your goals are. We include the dollar amount and a time frame that you're, wanting to, as far as when we measure saving, and that being one of our benchmarks that we're going to measure how much if you actually save. So say when we sit down and talk and you have $100, as long as you have increased that, when we do a final, not final, but we do another assessment in 3 months after that initial one. And as long as you have increased, and we prefer that you have, it's not mandatory, but we do want to make sure that we're keeping you accountable and helping you to increase your savings. And so that's something that you want to make sure that you're doing. But then you may say, hey, look, I want to have $500 saved in 6 months. Well, that's your personal goal. And that's what it's saying here. Include a dollar amount and have a time frame of what you want to have your, as far as meet a goal for yourself. And so you set up your budget, you choose, and we talked about percentages earlier, where you look at what percentage of your net income is going towards the different categories. And I can definitely provide that to each one of you as well later. Set up a separate savings account, paying off debt, save on a regular basis. All of these are pretty much repetition of what we've already talked about. But the main thing is to make sure that you do stick to your action plan. So when we talk about, I think this is actually the last one, when we talk about COVID and looking at ways that we can do as much as we can with less, that it is important that you know what you do have coming in, whether it is unemployment or whatever resources you have, if you have a side gig or whatever, and then also knowing what you have going out. So we are able to sit down with you, look at where there may be some holes where you're not able to make those ends meet. We are able to sit down and see if we can negotiate. Like, for instance, I had a client today who was saying that they were able to have their car payment deferred, tacked onto the end of that loan. Those type of situations where you may be able to have some type of modification to your current debt to be able to pay the rent or whatever the situation is, utilities, or put gas or food or whatever you're needing. So we definitely want to make sure we sit down individually and talk about what you have as far as your particular situation. So everyone's will be different, but we are available to negotiate. And I always tell our clients, if you call a creditor and you do not get what you want from them. As far as you ask them to, if you're trying to get them to work with you, put it that way, and they're not able to fulfill that on that first try, I always recommend calling back, speak with someone else to make sure that it cannot be done, because sometimes it can be done, but the person that you spoke with may not either know it or may not want to do it. So we do ask for that you be persistent in trying to get your situation resolved, and making sure that you never say, well, I'm not going to be able to get this done. Just try. And if you can't get it the first time, try again, And so that is the most important thing. Just never saying, getting to a point where you give up and trying to get, because they're going to work with you. They would rather for you to call and let them know that you're trying to pay, or you want to pay, but you just may not be able to, versus you not calling at all, and that type of situation. So that's basically it for the presentation. Bielka, I don't know if there are any other questions, or and we're going to talk a little bit more. I do have something else I wanted to talk about. Bear with me just a second. I wanted to talk about disaster recovery part of Operation Hope in a little bit more detail, as far as the different tools that we have. So one of them is steps to take, and I can email this to everyone as well. So as part of our Hope Coalition of America, and I'm not really sure what's going on right there, but as far as
I was going to ask you, were you getting creative? But I said, everybody's doing things different during this COVID time. So I didn't know that was an arts and craft project.
I wasn't even touching it. And I saw it was like scribbling. I'm like, what is that? But anyway, I'm just going to ignore it. But especially during COVID and so many being impacted with layoffs and that type of thing. So we definitely want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are available to assist and to help connect individuals with resources. So with that, even before COVID, such as natural disaster, hurricanes, tornadoes or whatever, we're able to assist because we have a partnership with FEMA. So what we actually have done, we have created a document called the Emergency Financial First Aid Kit. And what this does, it tells you about being prepared, how to strengthen your financial preparedness for disasters and emergencies. Now, forgive the date there because they have not updated it to my knowledge, but it's still, the information is still very valid for today's situation. So what it does, it tells you ways that you can deal with emergencies and what to do on the other side of being prepared for emergencies as well. So that is something that we do recommend, even like now that we're in this, but also being preventive for anything else that might come up in the future. You want to make sure, just like our chairman said, this is sort of like a reset for us because we've never experienced this before, but it's actually a learning lesson as well because it's teaching us what we need to do so that we don't end up in the same situation that we may find ourselves in. So I will make sure that I get this to you. And the second part of it is a personal disaster preparedness guide. This goes into a little bit more detail as far as specifics on documents, for family members, making sure that you have your vital records in a safe place so that if you ever have to retrieve this information, you would have it all in one location. Different, like I said, demographic information, employment information, assistance numbers for like Red Cross, FEMA, state emergency system, having that readily available. And so as you see that there's some medical information for family members, doctors, phone numbers, a lot of that we don't even think about. And now, especially with cell phones, we really don't even know numbers anyway, phone numbers. So to have this information is like priceless. So this is another tool that I'm going to make sure we get in the hands of the participants that are here today to make sure that you do have this available. And if you haven't, like I said, it's never too late to get it together and to have it in a safe place where you can be able to retrieve it. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about is the Earned Income Tax Credit, which Operation Hope partners with some of our locations, which are VITA tax preparation centers. And so what we do is we make individuals aware that whether you know it or not, some people qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit, some may not. But then some qualified and they didn't even, take advantage of it. So we do provide this information that tell you what you may qualify for. But the main thing that we actually use this information for is to know that if you're getting a refund, part of that refund should be allocated to savings. And so that's why we make sure that we bring this to the forefront, and that you're getting money that you're going to be able to hopefully build your emergency fund with. And so we like to make sure that we do say that. And I've said this in previous workshops as well. So whenever you do get a refund, what I recommend is, before you actually get the money or any kind of bonus or anything in your hand, determine where that money is going to go by looking at a percentage. And say you have some bills that you want to pay off or something, you have to make sure that you still keep in mind that you want to save a portion of it. So say, you want to take 60% of it and pay some bills, catch up on some bills, but then also make sure that you allocate, 40% or whatever that number looks like for you, to be able to save. And that way, when the money is, and I say depleted, but when you no longer have it in your face, you say, okay, well, I did save a certain amount, or I did do this, and not feel bad about it going all to a bill. So that's the purpose in basically talking about the earned income credit, is bringing it to the forefront of a portion of your refund should be going towards savings. So that's basically the presentation. And are there any questions, Bielka, since the last time in the chat?
No, but what we will do is, for everyone that is logged on, we will be sending out this information. You'll get an email either from myself or from Shonda with details on how to set up one-on-one consultations with her. I am encouraging you all to take advantage. Overworker, it's okay, overworker. And the reason I say this is we sometimes believe that financial wealth is for someone else. We believe home ownership is for someone else. We believe good credit is for someone else. We allow others' negative comments. We allow others' biases and their thoughts about who you are and what we are to affect our long planning. I had a conversation with someone about life insurance today. They asked me what my opinion to help them obtain life insurance. And my question to her was, and it was part of it had to do with fear. And I said, if you move based off of fear, you will never find success. You have to know what you are investing in. When Shonda was mentioning investing, we're not saying this is when it is to invest your monies. My comment always will be to you, before you invest money or invest in something outside, take the time to invest in yourself.
That's right.
Take time to discover what's new about you. The same way the stock market has its ups and downs, so do you. So this is an opportunity. I'm loving the disaster preparedness information. Too many of us have no plan. Too many of us, one of my daughter's good friends just had a house fire at her apartment community, no fault of her own. It was a domestic violence person in that same building. And she lost everything. She literally got out, thankfully, with her daughter and her shoes and what was at the door, and lost everything. And, when Shana just made a point, we are so technology savvy that we are behind the times. We don't remember anyone's phone number. I can remember my childhood phone number, but can't remember my office number now because I don't practice it. It's all in a cell phone. So when people are looking for their vital records and they're coming for help and you don't know where your documents are, if there was an emergency right now and you had to evacuate your home right now, you got 5 minutes to get out, will you know where to go find your birth certificate, your IDs, and all the vital information, things about you? If God forbid, if you were to pass tonight, will your family know where to look for documents? Will they have to piecemeal everything together? So part of this budgeting and part of all the work that we are doing to help you to have your 5-year plan, it all starts with you. You making an investment to work on your mindset and your attitude towards how you see your future. Having all these things written down in one place is wonderful, but you need to communicate with your family what these plans are. When you're getting these refunds, somebody had on Facebook the other day, and I fell out laughing. Shauna, the little, she said her son, her 15-year-old son came to her and said he was looking for his money. And she said, "What money?" He said, "Well, they said we got a stimulus. And because I'm your child, you got $500 for me. Where's my money?"
Wow.
And I laughed because, see, this young man, and the young man is, and she was explaining it on this. She was saying, you know, he wants to know, what are you going to do with this $500 that you're getting on my behalf? Just like these earned income. And you have some people that says, well, I'm paying the bills, and you are absolutely right. But what are you investing for your children's future? Those $200 pairs of sneakers will only last but so long. That could have been in a money marketing account that's building your child's wealth. So we're getting ready to end this out. I appreciate everybody for logging on. If you have gained anything tonight, I hope mostly is that you are taking this time to invest in your future and the future of your family. And it has to start with you making the move to change your attitude and your mindset about your money. And we're just grateful for everybody being on. You will get more information about other events. And Shonda, I've already gotten a few people asking, can we do this again? Can we host another session? I'm always asking Shonda to come on. And we will get some more dates out and put on, because I want you to take what you've learned, and I would love for you to join us again. Have your children watch, call your best friend, call all of your church members, and tell them to log in.
Yes.
We as a community have to learn that the financial wealth starts with us. Our money is what makes this world go round. So on that note, I will be saving, let me make sure I save the chat so Shonda can have all this information.
Thank
and
you.
If there's anything that you guys need, you guys have my email, and you have Shonda's information. I'm about to put my email back in this group chat for you guys. It is vielka.gabrielle@wakegov.com. Feel free to reach out. And like I said, we are in this together, and I've truly enjoyed. Shonda, thank you so much. Always doing a great job. We just will be in touch.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.